I came back from the airport for one folder, my husband's will. But when I stepped into my own house, I froze. My son's voice carried through the walls. If she slips again, we can prove it. And my daughter-in-law replied, once the guardianship is approved, everything transfers to us. They were planning to erase me. For 10 years, I worked night shifts so he could finish college without loans. I co-signed their loans, paid their rent, bought their car, and this was my reward. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I hid a recorder in my coat and captured every word. These homes are like resorts, Mom. You'll be safe there. He smiled, thinking I was weak. In court, they painted me as confused and frail. But then the judge heard their voices, my son's manipulation, my daughter-in-law's admission. And she saw the video, him sliding the guardianship petition across my table. They thought I would crumble. Instead, the judge denied everything, branded them with elder coercion, and handed me back my life. I may be 74, but let me tell you this, not all silence is weakness. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's the blade of justice. You might also be a mother, or maybe a son or daughter who has felt the weight of family struggles. You'll understand this heart to heart. Share your thoughts in the comments, because stories like these belong to all of us. May God never let anyone else face the kind of pain that comes when your own blood turns against you. Now, let me share my story. I was supposed to be gone. By now, I should have been halfway through security, boarding pass crumpled in my hand, watching strangers shuffle toward their gates. But instead, I was back in my driveway, staring at the front door of the house my husband and I built brick by brick. Why? Because of one folder. Arthur's will, the original, not the copy I kept in the file cabinet, not the scanned version on my laptop, the real thing. I had packed in a rush for my trip to Atlanta to see my sister, and halfway down the interstate I realized I left it behind. Something told me to turn back, something heavier than forgetfulness. When I slipped my key into the lock, I expected the same old creak. What I didn't expect was silence, not the warm silence of an empty home, the kind that presses on your chest, the kind that tells you someone else is inside. I didn't call out. I kept my shoes on. And then I heard them. Voices, low, deliberate, careful, coming from the dining room. I froze, my son's voice, Michael, deep, steady, like it always had been, but the words twisted me cold. If she slips again, we can prove it, he said. Then her voice, Amanda, my daughter-in-law. The doctor's notes help. All we need is one more incident. She misplaces things constantly. It won't be hard. My breath snagged in my throat. They were talking about me, about guardianship, about building a case that I wasn't capable of handling my own affairs. Amanda's voice sharpened. Once the court agrees, everything transfers to us. The house, the accounts, even the lake property. She'll be comfortable, but out of the way. Michael chuckled, not kindly, not nervously, just sure. She won't fight. She trusts me too much. That was the moment my knees weakened. Not because I doubted my mind, not because I feared their plan would work, but because it was my son saying it, my only child. I backed up quietly, heel by heel, careful not to let the floorboards betray me. My hand clutched the banister like it was the only thing keeping me upright. By the time I slipped back outside, my chest was tight with something colder than rage. I sat in my car, hands gripping the wheel, staring at the front window. The curtains swayed faintly. My own son, plotting to erase me, sitting at the same table where I once cut his sandwiches into triangles because he swore they tasted better that way. And here, what burns. I shouldn't have been surprised. The signs had been there. For more than 10 years, I carried that boy on my back. After Arthur died, I worked nights at the library archives, gray concrete basement, humming fluorescent lights, stacks of forgotten records. I cataloged dusty files until my eyes watered so Michael could finish college debt-free. I skipped vacations. I skipped dentist appointments. I skipped living. When he lost his first job, I covered his rent. When he wanted to buy a fixer-upper, I co-signed the loan. When Amanda wanted a new car, I lent them money from my savings account. They always promised to pay me back. I never asked them to. Because that's what mothers do. Or at least, that's what I believed. But somewhere along the way, sacrifice turned into entitlement. My son stopped saying thank you. He started saying, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll handle it." And I let him, because I thought it meant he cared. Now I see what it really meant. Control. I didn't go back to the airport. Instead, I drove aimlessly, ending up outside the bakery Arthur and I used to visit every Sunday. The sign had changed, but the smell, fresh bread, cinnamon, was the same. I sat at a corner table, coffee in hand, watching strangers bustle past the window, and my mind wandered back. Michael at 10 years old, building towers with sugar packets on the same table, asking me how bridges stayed up, how elevators didn't fall. Hungry for answers, curious, alive, I gave him books, circled paragraphs, pushed him forward. I believed in him more than he believed in himself. And now he was planning to put me away. Like an old file, misplaced, forgotten. I clenched the coffee cup tighter. My hands didn't shake, they steadied. That's when it hit me. If they were building a case, so would I. The next day, I drove to the library where I had spent 30 years of my life. The carpet was new, but the smell, ink, and dust still wrapped around me like an old coat. I asked to see the archives. The young man at the desk barely looked up as he handed me a clipboard. I signed in and walked past the rows of cabinets, my footsteps falling in rhythm with my thoughts. I found Arthur's original will where I knew it would be. Thick folder. Margins filled with his tidy handwriting, charts of assets, notes in red ink, and one line that froze me. D retains authority. Son not to hold full access until independent review. Arthur had seen it too, the risk. And he had trusted me to stand firm. I copied the pages, tucked them into my bag, and began making a list. Copies. New attorney. Medical evaluation, official, notarized. Audit of financial accounts. By the time I left, the winter sky had turned blue-black. My steps felt lighter, steadier. They thought I was slipping. They thought I was weak. But they had forgotten who raised Michael, who kept this house standing, who buried Arthur and still walked upright. I was not done. Not by a long shot. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my journal. I wrote every detail I overheard, word for word, date and time. Then I slipped a small recorder into the lining of my coat, an old habit from the library days when I documented oral histories. The next morning, I left the front door unlocked. I boiled tea, left the kettle slightly ajar, shuffled papers just enough to look careless. By mid-morning, Michael arrived, unannounced like he owned the place. Grocery bag in one hand, that practiced smile on his face. "Hi, Mom," he said, kissing my cheek. "Brought you some soup." I let my pen roll from my hand onto the crossword puzzle I'd been pretending to work on. I blinked slowly, smiled faintly. "That's nice, thank you." He moved around the kitchen like an inspector, scanning the pill bottles, the unopened mail, the calendar on the fridge. "You've missed your checkup again," he remarked. "I'll call the clinic for you." I nodded, murmured, "Oh, I must have forgot." The recorder in my coat captured every word. Then he said it, softly, almost tender. "I've been looking into places, nice homes, gardens, music therapy. You'd be safe there, Mom." I lifted my spoon slowly, stirred the soup. "That might be nice," I whispered, "not having to cook." Then I asked him what day it was. His smile widened, satisfied. And the recorder blinked silently in my pocket. When he left, I locked the door, placed the recorder on the desk, and played it back. His voice, his words, my evidence. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I simply sat there, pen in hand, making another list. Hire attorney. Revoke his access to accounts. Secure doctor's affidavit. Inform trusted neighbor. This wasn't just about protecting myself, it was about setting things right. Because if my own son wanted to reduce me to case file, then I would show him what happens when you underestimate a librarian. That was the day something in me shifted. I stopped being only a mother. I started becoming my own defender. And Michael would learn, slowly, painfully, that not all silence is weakness. The morning after I recorded Michael, I made my first call. Not to him, not to Amanda. To a woman I hadn't spoken to in years, Margaret Holt. Margaret and I had worked side by side in the archives for almost 2 decades. She had left to practice elder law, specializing in estate disputes. Sharp as a blade, patient as stone. If anyone knew how to dismantle a scheme like Michael's, it was her. I dialed her office number, half expecting the secretary to brush me off. But the moment I said my name, Margaret picked up herself. "Dollars," she said, voice brisk but warm. "It's been years. What has happened?" I told her everything. The overheard plan, the recorder, the will, every detail, my voice steady, my words careful. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she let a pause linger. Then she said, "You did the right thing calling me. But listen closely, do not confront him yet. We'll build our wall before he knows you've even started stacking bricks." Her confidence steadied me. The next step was medical. Margaret insisted on a cognitive evaluation, completely voluntary, official, and notarized. She said judges didn't care about feelings. They cared about paperwork. So I called Dr. Evans, my longtime physician. His office smelled faintly of disinfectant and peppermint candy. He ran the tests, memory recall, reflexes, problem solving. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly. "Dollars, you're sharper than most 60-year-olds I see. I'll sign whatever you need." And he did. A letter confirming my cognitive soundness, stamped, signed, sealed. I slid it into a new leather folder I bought just for this war. A war of documents, dates, signatures. 3 days later, Michael showed up again. No call, no warning. He had a manila folder tucked under his arm and that same fake concerned smile. "I just wanted to check in," he said, setting down grocery bags. "Soup again, always soup. Amanda's way of making it look like care." I played the role of fragile mother. I let the spoon tremble in my hand. I forgot where the salt was. I asked him the same question twice. And all the while, the second recorder I'd hidden under the dining room table hummed silently. He leaned closer. "Mom, Amanda and I have been talking. You deserve peace. These homes aren't what they used to be, they're like resorts now. It's for your safety." I smiled faintly. "Maybe you're right." Then I let my eyes drift toward the window as though I was already fading. But inside, I was engraving every word. When he left, I labeled the file, Michael Pitch Assisted Living. Margaret came over the next evening. She brought her laptop, spread out papers across my kitchen table, and listened to the recordings with a still face. When they ended, she closed her laptop with a soft click. "Good," she said. "Very good. He's digging his own grave." She explained our plan. First, we'd file a formal revocation of Michael's financial authority. He'd quietly shifted access to some of my accounts last year, and I had let it slide. No more. Margaret drafted the papers on the spot. Then she had me sign a new will, clear, precise, airtight. Executed with witnesses she brought herself. Every clause protected, every signature validated. Finally, she helped me set up encrypted cloud storage for my documents. We'll assume he tries to tamper. This way, even if he gets into your desk, the originals survive. Her thoroughness was a balm. For the first time in months, I slept with both eyes closed. But Amanda was the clever one. 2 weeks later, she came by alone. No smile, no soup. She carried a folder stuffed with brochures. "Dollars," she said, slipping into a chair like she owned it. "Michael's too soft. He doesn't want to push you, but I care about your safety. Look at these places." She spread out glossy pictures, gardens, smiling nurses, private rooms with lace curtains. She tapped her manicured nail on the fine print. "See? 24-hour supervision. That's what you need." I looked down, let my eyes linger. "They're very pretty," I said softly, "but expensive, I suppose." Her smile flickered. "Don't worry about that. Once the guardianship is approved, the assets transfer. Insurance will cover the rest." Guardianship. She said it out loud. I kept my face blank, nodded like I hadn't fully understood. But my hand rested lightly on the table's edge, right above the hidden recorder. That night, I labeled the file, Amanda Guardianship Admission. I could have confronted them then, could have stormed into Michael's house, slammed the recordings on the table, screamed that I wasn't senile. But that's not how you win against people like them. No, you let them keep talking, keep plotting, keep believing you're too weak to fight back. Because the higher they climb on their ladder of lies, the further they'll fall when you kick it out from under them. Meanwhile, I began strengthening my community ties. I asked my neighbor, Mrs. Parker, to stop by more often. She was in her 60s, sharp as ever, and she agreed to sign affidavits about my daily independence. I called my old book club friends, invited them for tea, and made sure they saw me reading, organizing, planning. Witnesses, all of them. And I wrote everything down. Every visit, every conversation, dated, timed, signed by me, a journal of truth. Michael's third attempt came on a Sunday afternoon. He arrived with Amanda this time. They sat across from me, their smiles rehearsed, their words smooth. "Mom," Michael began, "we've spoken to an attorney. He says if you keep forgetting things, it may be time to think ahead." Amanda leaned in. "We'd never want to take anything from you. This is about protecting you, but the paperwork, it's necessary." I tilted my head, let my brow furrow. Paperwork. Michael slid a draft across the table. I didn't touch it, but I saw the words at the top, petition for guardianship. My chest burned, but not with fear, with certainty. "Let me think on it," I whispered, pushing the paper back toward him. "I get so tired these days. Maybe you're right." They left, smug and satisfied. But what they didn't know was that my camera, hidden in the lamp base behind me, had captured the entire conversation. Paperwork, their faces, their voices. Proof. Margaret nearly laughed when I showed her. "Dollars, you're better at evidence gathering than half the paralegals I've trained." But I wasn't laughing. Because betrayal doesn't feel funny. It feels like standing barefoot on broken glass. Every step cuts deeper. Still, I pressed on. Margaret prepared a formal response to any guardianship petition. Attached affidavits, medical proof, recordings transcribed and timestamped. She built a file so heavy it could crush a courtroom table. We were ready. But then came the twist. A letter. Not from Michael, not from Amanda. From their attorney. A man named Douglas Crane. He wrote that he had been approached by my son and daughter-in-law, but after reviewing my case, he was withdrawing. Enclosed were draft petitions they had asked him to prepare, documents accusing me of memory loss, financial mismanagement, even paranoia. Lies. Cold, calculated lies. Reading them, I felt the old grief swell again, but I also felt something sharper. Vindication, because now I had their playbook. I tucked the letter into my folder, between Arthur's will and Dr. Evans's affidavit. Another stone in my wall. The next week, Michael showed up again. This time, he wasn't smiling. He slapped a thin folder onto the table. "Mom, why are you talking to lawyers? Why are you changing things?" I didn't flinch. I opened the folder calmly. Inside were copies of the new will, the revocation of his financial authority, and the affidavit of my medical competence, all documents Margaret had filed. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said evenly, "and pretending otherwise won't change that." His jaw tightened. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, I saw fear slip through their confidence. And I knew then they were losing. That night, I wrote in my journal, "The fight is not over, but the tide has turned. They think I'm weak. They don't realize strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits, and then it strikes." I closed the journal, placed it beside Arthur's old letter, and went to bed. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. Because the endgame was coming. And I was ready. The storm broke on a Tuesday morning. I was sipping coffee at the kitchen table, the one with a small chip in the corner from when Michael was 8 and dropped his toy truck against it. That chip used to make me smile. Now it reminded me of how much distance can grow between a mother and her child. The doorbell rang, sharp, impatient. When I opened it, Michael stood there in a press suit, Amanda at his side, lips tight. Behind them, a courier holding an envelope. He didn't even bother with pleasantries. "We've filed, Mom," he said flatly. "For your safety, you'll be served officially. It's better this way." The courier handed me the envelope, heavy, cold. Inside, a formal petition for guardianship, stamped with the county court seal. Amanda chimed in, her voice too smooth. "Don't fight it. The judge will see you're not well. It's just paperwork." I looked at them both, the people I had fed, sheltered, trusted. Then I closed the door without a word. And I smiled. Not with joy, with certainty. Because they had just walked into their own trap. Margaret came over that afternoon. She read the petition line by line. False claims of memory lapses, mishandled bills, erratic behavior. Each accusation lined up against the very evidence we had collected. She looked at me with something like pride. This is going to backfire on them, dolers. They don't know what's coming. Court was set for 2 weeks later. Those 2 weeks, I prepared like a soldier. I met with Dr. Evans again, securing an updated evaluation. I gathered affidavits from Mrs. Parker, my book club, the cashier at the pharmacy who saw me balance my own accounts. I even printed my journal pages, dated, signed, my own meticulous handwriting proving daily clarity. And every recording, every photograph, every letter from their attorney was cataloged in a binder as thick as a dictionary. By the time I walked into the courtroom, I wasn't a frightened widow. I was an archivist of truth. The courthouse smelled of old wood polish and nerves. I sat straight back at the petitioner's table, Margaret beside me. Michael and Amanda sat across the aisle, whispering to each other, trying to look calm. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair pulled tight, began by reviewing the petition. Michael's attorney, some fresh-faced man I didn't recognize, spoke first. He painted a picture of a frail, confused woman unable to care for herself. I let him talk. Every lie hung in the air like smoke. Then it was Margaret's turn. She stood steady and sharp. She presented the medical affidavits, the notarized evaluations, the letters from friends and neighbors. She played the recordings, Michael's soft manipulations, Amanda's cold admission about guardianship. The courtroom went still. And then Margaret presented the video, the one from the lamp camera, showing Michael sliding the petition draft across my table. The judge's eyes narrowed. By the time Margaret finished, the air in that room had shifted. You could feel it, the balance tipping. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. My knees ached, but my voice did not. I may be 74, I said, but I am not incompetent. I paid for my son's education. I built a home with my husband. I have managed accounts, property, and life for decades, and I am managing still. I paused, let the silence stretch. What I heard in my own house was not concern. It was greed. My son and his wife did not come here to protect me. They came to erase me, and I will not be erased. My voice didn't shake, it cut. The judge looked directly at Michael. Do you deny these recordings are your voice? Michael stammered. Amanda shifted in her seat. Their attorney mumbled something about context. The judge raised her hand. Enough. Her decision came swift and clear. Petition denied. Guardianship rejected. Costs assigned to the petitioners. A formal note of elder coercion entered into the record. Michael's face drained of color. Amanda's jaw clenched. And me, I sat straighter than I had in years. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks in tidy paragraphs, signed and sealed. But it wasn't just about winning the case. It was about reclaiming myself. After court, I didn't speak to Michael or Amanda. They avoided my eyes, shuffled out of the room, their shoulders heavy under the weight of exposure. I drove home alone. The house felt different when I walked in, not haunted, not fragile, strong. I placed the court order in my leather folder, right beside Arthur's will. For the first time, I felt I had honored his trust fully. The weeks that followed were quiet, but not empty. Margaret visited often, not just as a lawyer, but as a friend. She introduced me to her daughter, who helped me digitize old photographs and organize family archives. Mrs. Parker stopped by with pies. The book club ladies filled the living room again, laughing loudly, spilling tea on the carpet I no longer cared to keep pristine. My house was alive again. As for Michael, word spread quickly in the community. His business partners whispered. His friends pulled back. You can recover from financial loss, but not from being branded the man who tried to steal his mother's life while she still breathed. Amanda left her job quietly. Too many side eyes in the office, too many murmurs. Poetic justice doesn't always need handcuffs. Sometimes shame is the heavier chain. One evening, I found myself in the garden Arthur once tended. The roses were overgrown, wild in their bloom. I clipped a few stems, arranged them in a vase, and placed them on the mantel beside his picture. I did it, Arthur, I whispered. I kept the house, I kept myself. The air felt lighter, as if he was listening. Now, when I walk through these rooms, I don't hear echoes of betrayal. I hear resilience. I hear the steady beat of a woman who refused to be erased. I still ache sometimes. The wound of Michael's betrayal will never fully heal. He is my son, and that truth cuts deepest of all. But I have learned this. Love does not mean surrender, and motherhood does not mean silence. I've made changes since then. My new will names no single heir. Instead, my estate will be divided among scholarships, community archives, and a fund for elder advocacy. My legacy will not be swallowed by greed. It will build futures. And I've found a strange kind of peace. When neighbors ask how I'm doing, I smile, better than ever, because it's true. Looking back, I realized the moment everything shifted wasn't in the courtroom, or in Margaret's office, or even when I overheard Michael and Amanda's whispers. It was when I sat in my car that first day, hands frozen on the wheel, realizing my son had turned into a stranger. That was the moment I stopped being only a mother. That was the moment I became my own defender. And in defending myself, I found myself again. If you've ever been betrayed by blood, you know the sting, but betrayal doesn't define the ending. What you do next does. I chose not to crumble, I chose to stand. And I can tell you this. Not all silence is weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's survival. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's the sound of justice sharpening its blade.